Speaking of one-of-a-kind guys, I think that also applies to our friend and brother in broadcast, Joel Samy Unan. Good morning, Unan Samy, I should say. And Joel, good morning, from a host of co-host of America's Roundtable radio program, and co-founder of International Leaders Summit. And let me just say that you guys have some of the most interesting guests every single weekend, and it's one of those programs that you get into, and you'll come out better and more informed. And we do appreciate your dedication on that program.
Thank you so much indeed, Paul, for having me join you all this beautiful Wednesday morning. And thank you so much for your encouragement. Indeed, you all truly inspire and enlighten us all. And so we are beneficiaries of that. So thank you for your leadership, Paul.
You are on the ground. You know what's going on. Give us the very latest in what's going on with these negotiations between Washington, between Israel and Hamas, and where does that stand this morning?
Well, at this stage here, we certainly have to just go back a few months back and just to see how things materialized with the aid package being approved by both the House and Senate. Yet today, we still have problems whereby the Biden administration is holding and withholding weapons that Israel desperately needs today with its fight against Hamas in Rafah and in Gaza in general, as well as the attacks coming in from the north, from Lebanon. So there was supposed to be high-level talks today in Washington, D.C. However, the Biden administration has canceled these high-level talks with Israel due to the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, came out with a video in the last 24, 36 hours communicating his concern that these weapons have been withheld as Israel fends off even attacks from Iran, as we noticed on April the 14th, when over 300 drones and missiles from Iran, the first time in history, targeting Israelis. And certainly this is all happening under Biden's watch.
It's almost an unworkable time. This is the worst time to have negotiations going on. We are months away from an election. An election that could change everything as far as the seat of power is concerned. That plays into it. It plays it into it on Joe Biden's part, on Donald Trump's part, Israel, Hamas. Everything is kind of in a flux. Would you agree with that? I mean, that's an element in here that we're not going to get any relief on that one until after the election, period.
Indeed, well stated, Paul, in that respect. In fact, as we see what the Biden administration is doing is that its policies are actually driven due to electoral concerns. It's talking about a two-state solution in Israel, but it's also focused on that two-state issues that it has here in the United States, being, for example, Michigan and Minnesota, for example, where a very large Arab American community, is certainly displeased with Biden for its support of Israel. Israel is a strong ally of the United States. So yes, indeed, pushing Israel to accept a specific set of plans at this stage here, as you've rightfully mentioned, is not being done in a, in fact, as I look at it, from my personal perspective, is that Biden is not an honest broker in this deal.
Yeah. Well, and everybody on all sides figure he's very, very weak. We see that. Man, I was looking at some of the track marks that they've put on a GPS on some of the activity out in the ocean near our borders of Russia and some of these Russian ships. It's absolutely crazy what's going on. Weak leadership. We've heard that, Joel, in the annals of history books about how weak leadership starts wars. Man, it's playing out in real-time form now, that a weak leadership can cause trouble spots across the world.
Absolutely, Paul. In fact, it was just 4 years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago, we were living in a different world. It was a safer world. Today, we live in a very dangerous world where we have a major conflict on Europe's continent. We have conflicts flaring up in the Middle East, not just only Israel, but in Syria, Iraq. We have, in fact, ISIS planning an attack on U.S. soil. And so,
Yeah.
as we look at what has transpired with, let's keep in mind just a week ago, Russian military vessels entered Cuba. And it reminds us of the days of the Cold War. So this is all happening under Biden's watch. And yes, our adversaries took note of America's weakened leadership. And that speaks volumes when America is not able to stand on the world stage and communicate with principles. And that's exactly what we've seen as far as America. It's as we look at what's transpiring with our leadership, even at the United Nations, at NATO, it's not certainly what it used to be. And so America's leadership certainly should be strengthened on the security front and here at home at the economic front as well.
Joel Samy is joining us. Joel, when you start thinking about, and you don't want to think about this one, this is one of those things that puts sweat beads on the forehead. You wake up November the 6th, you see it is Joe Biden. He is in there. He wins 4 more years. What does that look like at the end of 4 years? And nobody thinks that he'd make it, but let's just say at the end of 4 years, he serves another 4 years. What does that look like in America? If you go by the last 3.5 years, I don't think we'll have another election.
Well, it's very disconcerting to seeing what's happening to our fellow Americans. Biden talks about Bidenomics, but Bidenomics has gutted the American economy. Americans are far worse today than they were 4 years ago. Economically speaking, inflation has really cut into the American family budget. We're seeing high cost of energy. We're also noticing food prices going up and also not being able to live in a safe world. So we are certainly at a major crossroads, and having another 4 more years of a Biden administration would be disastrous for the United States and disastrous for our allies.
I agree.
They're deeply concerned about America's leadership, and we have this dangerous axis of evil. We have China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran all teaming up together against democratic nations, against the rule of law, against freedom. And what has changed is the fact that we had a change in leadership at the White House in 2021. And I think, heaven help us all if we wake up in November after the elections and find another 4 more years of disastrous policies.
I think if you took a poll in the state of Mississippi, certainly with this audience, that very few of them want to continue this Ukraine funding against Russia. They don't like Russia. We don't like Russia. We understand all of that. But we also understand what the American people are going through. And I don't think anybody trusts Russia. We talk about informing people. Well, for years before Ukraine went to war with Russia, we were informing them that these were the most corrupt country. This was the most corrupt country on the face of the earth. And I don't think they've changed. And I sincerely believe that somewhere down the line, all of this thing is going to be in a very bad story about where some of that money went. Your thoughts on this when we come back with Joel Anand Samy, host of America's Roundtable. What does he think about the Ukraine funding and where that situation is? And is there a possible agreement or peace there because of the election itself that we mentioned a few moments ago? Back with that and more coming up next. Joel Anand Samy is with us, the host, the co-host of America's Roundtable. Joel, I gotta do an audible on you because this one's been bugging me. And you're a man of world vision and everything else, but the other day there was an interview, and I captured a little bit of it, and I thought, this is crazy, absolutely crazy. Some of the people that this guy, Joe Biden, has put in positions of power. Christine Elizabeth Wormuth is an American defense official. She's a career civil servant. She serves as the United States Secretary of the Army. She should be nowhere near that. She's been in there since 2021. She's the first female United States Secretary of the Army, so therefore DEI is a big deal there. She and a very high-ranking general appeared before a congressional hearing, again, as the evil Matt Gaetz was questioning them. And this is about Niger.
In Niger right now, the government has stopped us from doing diplomatic overflight missions. So we have Army soldiers right now in Niger who aren't getting their troop rotations, who aren't getting their medicine, who aren't getting their supplies, who aren't getting their mail, and the two senior people in the United States Army are sitting before me. Are you going to do anything for the soldiers that are in Niger right now who can't get medicine? Yes or no?
Congressman, certainly. We can talk to General Langley and make sure that...
Oh, I've talked to General Langley. He comes in here and never has really good answers. I mean, what I'm telling the two of you is that you have a responsibility for these soldiers in Niger. I'm here to tell you we've received reports that they run out of medicine, that they cannot get their troop rotations. And you know why you don't know that? Because it's a cover-up. Because the U.S. Embassy in Niger is covering it up because of Secretary Blinken's embarrassment.
Wow.
Because Blinken went there in March of 2023 and said this was the centerpiece of our Africa strategy. This was the model of resilience. And then, lo and behold, the very coup leader we trained takes over the country. And then we struggle with whether or not to call it a coup. We've now called it a coup. Since we've called it a coup, now they won't let us get folks in and out. And so I'm looking at what could erupt as another Benghazi. And the whole reason intelligence isn't getting to us is because the embassy is blocking it because Blinken is humiliated that this failed.
Joel, it's worse than we thought. Not only there, another sign of weak leadership. There's been a political coup. Military factions over there taking over. Our soldiers are caught on the base. Are we going to get them out of what? We have no way to get in there. Your thoughts?
Indeed, it is a serious problem in not just only Niger, but in other parts of Africa as well. ISIS is making a strong comeback in that region. Terrorism is on the increase, and we're going to see great numbers of individuals, populations being displaced. And yes, as you've just, as we've heard Matt Gaetz question a defense official and not getting the answers that not just only members of Congress, but also the accountability to the American people, we're not getting clear answers. And that's where our discussion earlier on, Paul, in regard to the significance of U.S. leadership. When our allies and adversaries question America's leadership and also doubt its leadership, we're in trouble. And I recall the days of President Ronald Reagan or President Donald Trump when they communicated with principles. People understood that and took it seriously. And as we've seen, not just only the U.S. Embassy in Niger, but in other places as well, the embassies are not really held accountable for what they are communicating or the cover-up. We have seen this situation unfold in Eastern European countries. In the Balkans, for example, where they concealed, or actually there was a cover-up of information that should have been sent to members of Congress or to leaders in the states, and due to corruption and other things, they try to prop up corrupt leaders, corrupt people, and at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose situation for America and for our allies. And certainly Biden and his administration ought to be held accountable.
I will echo that because I think you hit it perfectly, Joel. It's a lose-lose situation for the American taxpayers as far as Ukraine and Russia's concerned. I got to think Zelensky's sitting there. He understands the monumental task of actually winning this war. And he also understands there's a new president coming in. It's already voiced opinion like the checks are not going to be coming in. So from the most corrupt, and we've also seen things he's already done over there, wouldn't you just put some money in a different account that's coming in and kind of pad it a little bit before the end, the ball drops in November? I think that would be the logical thing that they would do.
Yeah, indeed, Paul. In light of what's happening in Ukraine, we've got two sets of issues. One is the concerns that we all have about corruption in Ukraine, and we certainly need to address that. It's not just only in Ukraine, but in a number of NATO members today, like Croatia, for example. It's aiding and abetting Russian oligarchs, and it's also in bed with China. And this is a NATO member. So we're not doing a good job here in Washington, D.C. Members of Congress should hold these NATO members that are receiving assistance directly from the United States to account. At the same time, we do have a serious problem in Europe with an emboldened Putin. And that is going to be a serious problem for the next administration because, as President Ronald Reagan shared with us, that we certainly have learned from the two world wars, and I just would like to echo his sentiment when he shared this on June 6, 1984, and I quote, "We've learned that isolation never was and never will be an acceptable response to tyrannical governments with an expansionist intent," unquote. That's President Ronald Reagan. And Putin sending military vessels into Cuba, just 100 miles off the coast of Florida, U.S. territory, is a serious concern that we are entering a new Cold War.
I think we become immune to shocking stories out there, unfortunately. So if we fast forward to March, spring of 2025, and we hear a story that recently, after a pardon from his father, Hunter Biden is now the new ambassador of the Ukraine and is going there to work out a deal. I don't think anybody would be surprised. Joel, thank you, sir. I appreciate you spending some time with us very much.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate joining you all today on
it.
SuperTalk Mississippi Media.